Okay, how about this? An IL-2 Shturmovik. It's been a long time since I made one of these. I wanted to get the new-ish Airfix one, or even better, the old Airfix one, because I remember making the old Airfix one as a kid. I didn't know anything about the aircraft, and everybody was saying the Russians are the enemy, and all their stuff's rubbish and they're evil. I mean, if your army's rubbish, how can you be a good enemy? Why worry about them? But anyway, so all negativity, and it was about the only thing in the shop that day, and I bought the Airfix one and I went home and made it, and it was a brilliant model and a really impressive aircraft. It looked the business, it looked tough, it looked like it could do the job, and I believe it was a pretty good, pretty good thing all round. So I went to the model shop this time, and it was quite the opposite. This was the only, this is the North East model shop. It's a really big one. It's in an old chapel, and this was the only Shturmovik I could see, and it's by Tamiya. And it isn't cheap, but that's Tamiya, and B, that's import costs, and who knows what's going to happen with or without Brexit. Don't even mention that. Excuse me, naturally, I haven't opened it yet, but I'm sure Tamiya are going to make a fine, crisp and clean model. Hang on, what we got? Some nice, always got some handy information on the sides, haven't they, about colours and markings. So there we are. So I'm looking forward to it anyway, because I enjoyed the Shturmovik. So there's some wings. It's not a good day today. Often a bad day when I make models, because if it's a good day I'll be doing something else. Forced into the garden, what's left of it. Yeah, so there's a nice little bit of detail. And there is the rather lovely, I'm not going to use fuselage this time, it's too technical. There is the rather impressive, gorgeous, sleek body. Fabulous. So yes, this I think should all go smoothly, should be wonderful, shouldn't it? Let's get on. Right, at this point already, so soon, we come to a disaster, which is I've lost a bunch of shots. Basically all the shots of me putting the pieces together. I think I might have deleted them by accident. So what we'll do is we'll run through, oh, that was great TV, wasn't it? We'll run through the instructions. So very quickly, here's the two sides of the fuselage, and this bit, which goes over that bit, which is clearly the engine. That bit is made up of those bits. It all went brilliantly well, and I would say it's some of the best model making I've ever done. Then you put the cockpit together, I suppose is what you call it anyway. All of those bits, not only were they some of the best model making I've ever done, but some of the best paintwork I'd ever done as well. And I added some little men, which at least we'll be able to see their heads. Then these bits of interior go along quite nicely, and then you fit the pilot section. This is quite a nice little bit of design. You fit the pilot section to the rear gunner section with what looks like a massive fuel tank in between. That's cosy. I put those together really well. That went together probably some of the best model making I'd ever done. The interesting thing about this is that this here cockpit section, the interior, slots under the fuselage, which you've already glued together. That made a nice change. Shame we didn't see that. Anyway, that's how it goes. Then you do a bit of sort of interior wing for the wheels, but because the wheels are up I didn't worry too much about that. Then you do the kind of air vent that goes underneath the fuselage at the wing section. A couple of other little bits and pieces fit together, and then you push the wing up into the fuselage. Actually that didn't go so well, and now I've got, and I can't get rid of it, a very large gap along there, which is causing the wing to dip a little. and wings don't work very well when they dip, but it's only a tiny bit. I can see it. Hopefully I won't let you see it, and everything will work out well. But I must say, it's probably some of the best model making I've ever done. So now we'll move on to me make it. Weirdly, at this point, it all starts to go wrong. So you'll have to believe me when I say it's some of the best model making I've ever done. Honestly, just go with that. Actually, while we're there, worth mentioning, the wheels are going to be up. So I basically skipped some of that, popped the hatches across, and then dropped the wheel in. And as usual, I'm not going for too many weapons because you get a nice selection actually. I'm just going for those two little bombs, despite the fact that you get two whoppers or a bunch of rockets, which I really rather like. But I'm not going for that because this is such a smooth, sleek aircraft. I don't want to ruin its lines at all. And at this point, I think I'm burning my quiche. So I better go and eat some burnt quiche. Right, lots of stuff moved on quickly there. Put the cockpit bits and pieces together. Perhaps should have shown that. But I wanted to get that into the body in an up and under fashion, as I mentioned before. And then, to ensure I'd got that in the right place, I had to put the wings on. So I think the last thing I said is I'm going to put the wings together. Suddenly everything's just sort of gelled. I mean, we've got the majority of it in place. It's only little details and bits and pieces. Therefore, at this point, I feel I need to add a slightly contrasting shade of green, just to give it a sort of well-worn quality. This is gorgeous. That Tamiya green is probably the best, in my opinion. Although I use another one for kind of undercoats, the Halfords one. This is superb. And it has a sheen to it, as aircraft would have. Not quite gloss, definitely not satin, which is the most peculiar thing. It's just a very slight lack of matteness. And so I'm going to go for another shade of green that hopefully has a similar sheen to it. So off I go to ruin everything. 2 shades of green and a nose cone. How about that? I don't know that the shades of green show up. As usual, the light is terrible. It must be that I make models more often when the light is bad, because I'm not outside doing the obligatory gardening. Obligatory. Anyway, and also a nose cone. It's supposed to be a lighter red, but I had this nice dark one, and that was going to be the kind of undercoat, the base colour. But it is such a fantastic colour that I think the Soviet government and military made a mistake by not using that colour, personally speaking. I would have. So look, that's the reason why I like red. Fantastic. Anyway, so I'm going to leave it. What I was going to do is kind of brush a lighter red, very dry brush it over the top to give it yet again a textured quality, but I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it in the knowledge that I can't leave things alone and I fiddle with things all the time. So I am bound to go back and put a different coat of red over the top. But look at that. The 2 colours, really deep tones. Oh, fantastic. So there's some more kind of base coats on. It looks a bit like a toy right now, which is, I kind of worry about that, and sometimes they come out looking like the die-cast models, which is absolutely fine. But they have a sort of production line quality, which don't even start, obviously, machines that come off a production line in real life, like aircraft and tanks. they also have a production line quality, don't they? So I'm arguing against myself here, but the point being that when they've been out and flying and driving around and that kind of thing, there's not just the big weathering, there's toning down, there's texturing, there's individual events happening to each piece of the surface. So I'm never that keen on the pristine smooth surface. So these colours need toning down. Then the markings, then the weathering. That red nose, as the paint settled, is starting to look metallic. Is it metallic? It looks metallic, doesn't it? Let me have a... Hang on. Wee, wee. And it's metallic. Alright. I will do a bit of an overcoat on that one then. It's March, let's not kid ourselves. Spring isn't here yet. And it's about 11 o'clock in the morning. And I cannot see a thing. I don't like the paint so far on this. It's got a lot of work to be done. And today isn't the day to do it. This is as good as it's going to get. Zoom in on dead trees. Look at that. Won't even focus. Gordon Bennett. Better find another model, do some gluing. Oh well. Right, going well, in my opinion. What have I done? I've upped the bluiness of the blue-grey, and I've added some weathering. Mainly in a kind of almost toneless brown. It's a little bit heavy. We'll put the markings on and then sort of work a little more over that. But what it did is it showed up a horrible seam. I knew it was there, but I didn't know it was that bad. So now I've actually got a knife blade out onto it. It was so mighty. That means it will need a bit of a repaint, but that's okay. I quite like a little bit of highlighting along the sort of dorsal edge of aircraft now and again. And as this one I want to look really, you know, proper workhorse, then that'll be fine. Suddenly it all started going wrong. I thought things were going smoothly for a while. As usual, I haven't got a pointer. What a fool. Here we go. Great TV. The cockpit canopy. None of it really wanted to fit, but the front section fits into a little loop there on either side, and it didn't fit. Or if you did fit it in, then there was a colossal gap there, and you can just see that that's still sitting up, even though I've tried to take some of it down. So therefore, loads of filler, and I'll let that harden up a bit and then I'll trim it off. These didn't really want to fit either, and in the end I had to open up the gap in the wing and cut off the fixing pins. So there's that as well. Yeah, the glass wasn't happy. The light on the wing, that wouldn't fit in. I had to trim up all of the hole. So I know these things happen, but suddenly it's you get to a certain point and then all of the parts are failing to fit. Oh well, there we go. Not whinging, just letting you know. But on the whole, still, you know, it's coming together. And there's very little more to do. So, time to let the filler dry, let the new spiky bits dry, and then come back, trim up the cockpit paintwork, and yeah, well, paint over all of that, because there's plenty of that around. And then I think we're ready to put some markings on. and then the final spikes, and then a little bit more weathering. Ooh, it's very exciting. So I think we can assume I like this aircraft. I think it's a very good looking one, and it seems to have been quite an important one. And I'm reading from the background information sheet that comes with the model, and I'll just pick out some highlights. In February 1938, a team at the Central Design Bureau submitted a design for the heavily armoured and armoured single-engine two-seater attack aircraft called the BSH-2. So that's the beginnings, the origins of it. It's designed to be a ground attack aircraft. The prototype of this first flew in October 1939, so the Second World War has begun. It's a pretty sharp, pretty modern looking aircraft for a 1938 initial design, but anyway, and it had a distinctive air intake which was fitted on the top of the nose, which is very clever, and I think gives it something of that particularly sort of aggressive look, particularly down the nose end, of course. But anyway, and it was able to carry either bombs or rockets, which is you know, a nice bit of flexibility. I know plenty do, but there you go. Then let me find another interesting bit. Mass production began in December 1940, so time's passing pretty much, isn't it? But anyway, it's an important aircraft because apparently Stalin said it was as essential to the Red Army as air and bread. I take it they weren't drinking much at the time then, but you know, that's what he said. Apparently, is that true? I don't know. Later on, by about 1942, they were moving on to the idea of it being a two-seater with a rear gunner, which I think is probably really quite important, given the way the Messerschmitts like to attack things. But anyway, and then they developed sort of further tactics to deal with German tanks in particular. One was, and I quote, one which was developed involved a group of Shturmoviks which flew in a circle while individual aircraft broke off to attack one by one to keep the enemy under continuous fire. So that's a clever little move, a bit like actually ancient mounted archers would do, but obviously not in the air. And they, as usual, they sort of tend to try and attack the weaker rear of the tanks. Not necessarily the most accurate equipment though, so further developments were made. And it says here that by the time of the Battle of Kursk, the PTABs, abbreviation for anti-tank aviation bombs, in Russian obviously, were employed. A single Shturmovik could carry about 200 of these bomblets, which would saturate an area 70 metres long by 15 metres wide when dropped from an altitude of 3,000 metres. So that is pretty dramatic. And it says 70 of the 9th Panzer Division tanks were knocked out in just 20 minutes, while the 3rd and 17th Panzer Divisions each lost about 300 vehicles in 2 and 4 hours respectively. How about that? That's pretty powerful stuff. Anyway, the model, it wasn't as good as I was expecting. A few tricky bits going on there, particularly with the glassware. But the outcome, pretty much what I remember the aircraft being. My final thoughts, I probably need to look into getting the old Airfix version anyway, because it was rather nice. Well, anyway, it's one of my more sort of favourite aircraft. I think it's stylish, it's sleek, it looks the part, it looks very aggressive, and it was obviously something of a success. So, in the end, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I've added it to the collection. Still look out for the Airfix one though. And of course, thanks for watching. There will be more soon, I hope. And I hope everybody had a happy Christmas, holiday, festivity, solstice, anything else you want to do at this time of year, you do it and enjoy it. As long as it's, it doesn't harm anybody and cause damage to property. Or be cruel. Don't be cruel to animals or children. They're bad things too. Don't do them, particularly this time of year. Otherwise, I think we're all right, aren't we? I think we're there. I'm going now.